I recently fabricated these jump seats for the back of my Austin Gypsy, and I thought I would post a how-to video on them as well as some instructions on my website, www.austingypsy.net. Under resources you'll find a link to flip down seat fabrication. They're a really great seat because they're quite easy to make if you have some basic metalworking skills and some minor woodworking skills, and a little bit of sewing skills is good too, so you can sew these corners, but nothing too difficult. And they're a really great design because they fold up nice and tight and then they come down just like that. And the one thing with them is they do need a surface to come in contact with when they come down. Otherwise you'd have to build a flip down leg.
I thought these seats would be really interesting for people, even if you don't own an Austin Gypsy, because you can use these in a lot of different applications. You know, back of your Jeep or Land Rover, or maybe in a boat or RV. These are a total of 6 inches thick between the frame, like when this is folded down. So you could use 3-inch foam, you could use 3 for the back and 3 for the bottom. I just happen to have 2-inch foam, so I used 2 for the back, and I glued 2 2-inch pieces together to make 4, which actually works out better because more of your weight's going to be on there. For plywood I used 3/8 marine grade plywood. If you were going to make these seats, this is where you can get do whatever you want. You could make this seat this wide and just have this frame over here, and you could use 1/2-inch plywood, just go up a little bit thicker if you're going to go wider. You could also change the depth of these too. I went 15 inches depth and 15.5 wide because that's what's going to fit in my situation, because in the Gypsy there's storage compartments on each side. But I could have gone the full width of the side of the Gypsy too. So you can play around with these if you want, but I'll have all the measurements here. And foam, it's a little tricky to cut. I used a razor knife for the attaching points for the plywood. I used T-nuts in there. These are the pieces. Just need to cut 4 of these. And 4 of these to make one seat mechanism. And I just radius them on the corners just so they can clear here when they flip up. I put the bottom here because it gets more depth on this one. The links are on the outside. A little bit of a cold today, so my voice is a little bit cracky. So yeah, that's what I got there. I think that shows just how these work pretty well. So now looking at the layup for the vinyl covering, the easiest way to do it is when you've cut out your wood and the dimensions that you've decided to use, you take the thickness of your foam, which in this case is 4 inches, and you add 2 inches for tucking underneath for when you attach. I don't include the thickness of the plywood because when you push it down and you're stapling the covering on, you do want a little bit of squish. So I've got about a 3/8 of squish here, and an allowance to pull the vinyl over to make it taut. If you're going to sew the corners, you'll see how I've laid them up here. This allows for a fold where it'll get sewn right here and right here. If you don't have access to a sewing machine, you could just do them this way. Fold this down fold that on like a hospital corner when you're making a bed, and tuck it down like that. Pull it tight. It'll be a little tidier obviously, and then fold it under and staple it to your plywood. So again, 1/2 inch for your seam for the fold, and then after you sew it, you can trim off the excess too. Yeah, so that is my vinyl cutout. And then you'll see when you sew it, it's actually really easy. You just line up those corners like that, fold it there, and just a straight stitch down there. So these are my covers sewn now. Like I mentioned before, you can just trim off this edge so you don't have it making a wrinkle on the corners. And when you turn it inside out, you got a nice seam there. The way I assembled them, I put the one link on the outside for the bottom, and one link is on the inside for the vertical. You can see they'll fold like this. There's a washer in between each piece and a nylock nut on there. Ideally a shorter bolt would be good on here, just so you don't have anything sharp sticking out somebody could gouge themselves on. So to get the clearance nice here, I just am using these S-hooks as a spacer because they're about the same thickness as the head of this bolt. And that's just going to give it some room for the cushion and, you know, the vinyl and everything tucked in here. This is just the easiest way to mark where you need to drill. Take a drill bit that fits inside that T-nut, inside that 1/4 inch hole. Use it as a guide. Make sure I got it lined up in the edge. And then just start a good hole in there. So now when I go out to my shop and I drill those, they're right in the right spot, and you can see they're in the middle of that piece too. Yeah, and then the same thing on this side. And the same thing there. So now I got 2 good marks there. And then I mark them bottom back just so I know that's going to go there. Again, in case there's any discrepancies in these measurements, if you flip it around, it might not line up exactly the same, might be out of 16th. And I'm not sure if this is a typical thing or not, but this is how I stapled them, and that's how I stapled the front seats too. Looks a little industrial, but it is kind of a, it's just a utility vehicle anyway. It's not a Maserati or something. And then I'll tighten all these bolts up for the panels afterwards, because you know, you kind of wiggle things around and adjust them so they move smoothly. Yeah, so ready to pop that in the vehicle now. When I mounted this, I allowed for 1/4 of an inch of clearance under here because I'm going to put a rubber strip on there, which is going to be 1/4 of an inch thick, so it'll come down and land on here and not rattle. I used 5/16 thread inserts. I call them riv nuts. I spaced them 4 inches apart, and I used this tool here. You can get these on Amazon pretty cheap now. You can buy for about 80 bucks. You can get the tool, and you can get all the dies and a whole bunch of inserts too. Yeah, so that's what I got right there. That's how they mount on.
So here's the finished product. One nice flip down seat on each side. So yeah, thanks for watching my seat fabrication video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful.